When a 12-year-old boy uncovers a locked box in his attic, the first discovery he makes sends an icy chill through him. What seemed like an innocent search for old toys takes a terrifying turn as the evidence piles up, revealing a dark conspiracy that threatens not just his life, but the very foundations of his hometown. This is a story of betrayal, resilience, and the relentless fight for justice. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from, and if you believe that no secret should stay hidden forever, be sure to like and subscribe for more. Uncle Toby, I'm just going to look for a board game. Noah Carter shouted down the staircase that led to the attic. He had no idea how dramatically his life would change in the next 10 minutes. The storm outside raged with unseasonal force, rain lashing the roof as thunder rolled across the afternoon sky. Gray light slanted through the single attic window, illuminating swirls of dust drifting in the stale air. He held a flashlight in one hand, flicking it on whenever the overhead bulb threatened to go out. One moment, it hummed and glowed. The next, it blinked wildly as though it might give out at any second. Noah shivered in the chilly, cramped space. He heard his uncle's reply from below, "Take your time, kiddo. Just be careful up there. I don't need you stepping on any rusty nails." Noah felt a quick surge of affection for Tobias. His uncle was as cautious as he was kind, a steady fixture in Noah's life for the 6 years since his parents had vanished. Pausing to survey the piles of boxes, old furniture, and stray knickknacks, Noah took slow, deliberate steps on the creaking floorboards. He was a short, skinny boy, with unruly dark hair and eyes that always seemed to hold a trace of sadness. Even at 12, he was taller than some kids, but he hunched in on himself as though unsure of how much space he deserved to occupy in a world that felt incomplete without his mother and father. Outside, a gust of wind rattled the windows, and thunder rumbled so violently that it shook loose a small avalanche of dust from the rafters. Noah coughed, waving away the debris. "Come on, man," he muttered under his breath. "Let's find that board game and get out of here." Yet something tugged at his curiosity. He had been in the attic dozens of times, but there were corners he had never really explored, dark recesses where old suitcases and boxes teetered precariously. He stepped past an old trunk, around a moth-eaten armchair, and nearly tripped over a loose plank in the floor. With a startled oath, he caught himself just in time, the flashlight beam swinging wildly. That's when he noticed a definite gap in the wood, a small slit that could be a hiding place for something. His heart thumped a little harder. Why was there a hollow space beneath one of the boards? Kneeling, he pried at the edge with tentative fingers. A cold draft brushed over his skin as he worked the plank loose, eventually managing to lift it with a groan of rusty nails. Beneath the floor, in the narrow space between the beams, lay a small, dust-caked box secured by an old-fashioned latch. Noah exhaled sharply. "This wasn't here before," he whispered, though there was no one else around to hear him. A swirl of excitement and dread coursed through him. He tugged the box out, coughing as he disrupted more dust bunnies the size of small animals. It was heavier than he expected. His heart rate soared with an inexplicable combination of hope and fear. He set the flashlight aside, letting it illuminate the battered wooden box. It was about the size of a shoebox, scuffed and stained with age. A tiny padlock sealed it shut. Locked. He breathed, nibbling his lip. Yet it looked so worn he suspected a screwdriver might pop it open. He glanced over at a shelf crammed with abandoned tools, loose screws, a hammer, a broken saw, and yes, a rusted flathead. He snatched it up and gingerly inserted the screwdriver under the latch, prying with a soft grunt. After a few moments of effort, the padlock snapped open with a brittle snap that made his heart skip a beat. "You'd think I was opening some pirate chest," he murmured, letting his imagination swirl. "Treasure in the attic." He lifted the lid, half expecting worthless trinkets or maybe old letters. Instead, his flashlight revealed a bundle of newspaper clippings, folded carefully, bound by a rubber band that had begun to crumble. Beneath that lay something wrapped in plastic. He peeled the plastic back to reveal a phone, shiny black, but not a model he recognized. It looked brand new, though the battery indicator suggested it was half-charged. A specialized charger was coiled next to it, sealed in a ziplock to protect it from moisture. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the attic in a strobe-like glow. Noah's breath caught in his throat. "This is weird," he mumbled, picking up the phone and hitting the power button. It lit up. The home screen contained almost nothing, just a single text message icon. Slowly he tapped it. His stomach lurched as he read the words. "If something happens to us, don't trust anyone." Noah blinked, rereading the text to be sure he hadn't hallucinated. It remained stark and chilling. "Don't trust anyone," he repeated. An unspoken dread crept up his spine. He was already thinking about his parents, Lisa and Mark Carter, who had vanished without explanation. He had tried to conjure a million different theories in the years since. Maybe they had died in a car crash, maybe they had fled from debt, maybe they were abducted. But the sheriff had always insisted there was no sign of foul play. The official line was that they simply took off. That, or they were presumed dead, though no bodies had ever been found. Hands trembling, Noah set the phone aside and turned his attention to the bundle of newspaper clippings. He slipped off the disintegrating rubber band, scanning the headlines by flashlight. They referenced missing people, all from around Hartley's Creek or the neighboring counties, spanning a decade. Photos of smiling faces stared up at him, accompanied by words like "vanished," "no leads," "investigation continues." On each article, near the headline, someone had scrawled a triangular symbol with an eye at its center, circled in bright red ink. Noah's breathing grew shallow. That symbol, he'd never seen it before, but it radiated an unsettling menace. Who had drawn it and why? One of the more recent articles was about a local teacher who disappeared under mysterious circumstances. Another, about a traveling salesman who never reached his destination. Flipping through them, he gasped when he came to a clipping about his own parents. The headline reading "Missing couple leaves son behind, town search yields no clues." He recognized the family photo they always used in the coverage. It sent a pang through his heart to see his mother's warm smile, his father's strong arm around her shoulders, his own younger self beaming in the center. Scribbled in red on that article was the same triangular symbol, etched so hard it almost tore the newsprint. Outside, thunder rattled the window in a roar that jolted Noah. He stared at the ciphers, the text message, and the phone. "They didn't just leave," he muttered, tears prickling his eyes. He had always suspected it, but seeing these articles, with that cryptic symbol repeated over and over, made the notion almost undeniable. "They were onto something," he said softly, "and it got them hurt." He might have stayed there, reeling in shock, if not for his uncle's voice drifting up the attic ladder. "Noah, you all right up there? Did you find that game?" Quickly, he stashed the phone and the clippings back in the box, shoving them under his shirt. He replaced the floorboard as best he could, aware that his heart was beating way too fast. His mind spun with questions. Don't trust anyone. Did that include Uncle Toby? No, he couldn't imagine his gentle uncle being part of a conspiracy, but the message hammered on his awareness. Fear coiled in his gut as he poked around for a random board game to serve as cover. After rummaging in a trunk, he grabbed a battered copy of Monopoly, then clambered down the attic steps. Tobias Reed, a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes, stood in the narrow hallway. He wore an oil-stained apron from an afternoon spent repairing the old truck. "There you are," he said with a chuckle. "Did you get lost in the junk up there?" "Yeah, kinda," Noah replied, forcing a nonchalant shrug. "Found this. Thought maybe we could play later." He held up the Monopoly box, ignoring the weight of the hidden items under his shirt. Tobias smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Sure, if the power goes out, it'll give us something to do." His gaze flicked up to the attic hatch. "Storm's only getting worse. You might want to close up there. Don't want the wind blowing in dust." "Got it," Noah said. He tugged the attic door shut. Moments later, he excused himself and scurried to his bedroom, locking the door behind him. He carefully transferred the box, phone, and clippings to his bed, heart hammering. His legs trembled as he sank onto his mattress. The old floor creaked beneath him. He wanted to talk to Uncle Toby. He wanted to demand answers. But the phone's cryptic warning echoed, "Don't trust anyone." It made no sense to doubt the uncle who had looked after him so lovingly for 6 years. Then again, it made no sense that a phone hidden in his attic would hold a text from his missing parents, or that half the police force might be corrupted. But his intuition insisted there was more to the puzzle. He had to piece it together before tipping his hand. If Toby knew something, if Toby was protecting him from a bigger threat, Noah needed proof. He pulled out his own phone, turning it over in his hands. It was an old model, the screen cracked at the corner. He never texted anyone except a few friends from school. The smartphone he found in the box was a burner phone. He'd seen enough movies to recognize the style. Minimal apps, likely used for covert communication. He pressed the button again, rereading that last text. It was saved in the drafts, or so it seemed, never actually sent. This phone wasn't linked to any contact that he could see. The message was short but made his skin crawl with its urgency. He scrolled through what little content was there, found a single blurry photo in the gallery. It showed two silhouettes, one tall, one shorter, standing outside an old house with rotting shutters. They stood in front of a battered mailbox, and though the image was grainy, Noah thought he could make out partial house numbers, 49-something. That was it. If these silhouettes were his parents, this might be the last place they were before they vanished. He sat there, heart pounding, thoughts swirling. His parents had risked everything. They had discovered a pattern in the missing person cases, one that apparently pointed to a triangle eye symbol. Why was law enforcement lying? Or maybe it was just some members of law enforcement. The sheriff had always seemed kind. As a little boy, Noah believed him when he said they had done everything possible to find his parents. No more illusions, Noah whispered, shutting off the burner phone. I'm not losing more time to false hope. He quickly shoved the items into his backpack, then hid the backpack in a corner of his closet behind winter coats. If Toby found it, he'd have to come up with an excuse. But that was a risk he was willing to take if it meant learning the truth. Lightning flashed, followed by a crack of thunder that shook the window panes. He lay awake that night, listening to the storm's fury, mind spinning with the words on those clippings. His parents' faces stared at him from memory, their voices lost to time. He could barely recall them singing lullabies or teaching him to ride a bike. Now, a sense of anger coiled in him, anger at the deception, anger at the fear that kept him in the dark for so long. By dawn, he had resolved to do something, even if it meant sneaking out and investigating the house in that blurry photo himself. The next day felt surreal. The storm had cleared, leaving behind a damp, overcast sky that threatened more rain but held back for now. Toby was off to work at the local hardware store, leaving Noah alone to do chores and watch old cartoons. As soon as Toby's pickup rattled away, Noah darted to his closet, grabbed the backpack, and unzipped it to confirm his hidden treasure. He thumbed through the clippings again. Many mentioned vanishings from about 6 or 7 years ago, right around the time his parents disappeared. Some articles described how the missing were last seen near the woods or a remote property, and every single time, the triangular eye symbol had been scrawled in the margin, as if the person collecting these clippings recognized the pattern. One snippet included an address half hidden by a coffee stain. He recognized the partial street name as Maple Ridge Road. He cross-referenced it with a local map he found online, searching for addresses that began with 49. Sure enough, he located a rundown property at 4927 Maple Ridge, on the outskirts of town, near an overgrown orchard. The pieces were coming together, and they led him to that battered house. He changed into jeans and a sweatshirt, rummaged for a granola bar, and stuffed it in his pocket. Then he grabbed his bike from the garage, pedaling out under the dim sky. His heart pounded with both fear and excitement as he skirted the edges of the small downtown area. Hartley's Creek was a quiet place, population just shy of 8,000, with old Victorian homes and a main street that still had a soda shop and a barber shop that doubled as a gossip hub. Everyone tended to know everyone, which made sneaking around tricky. Even so, Noah rode with his hood up, face angled away from passing cars. Maple Ridge Road branched off the highway, weaving past farmland and patches of thick woods. Within 20 minutes, he found a dirt lane leading into a tangle of old trees. The wooden sign read Maple Ridge, but the paint was peeling so badly it was almost illegible. Following that lane, he noticed a battered mailbox leaning at an awkward angle. The address read 4927. A jolt of recognition made him slow. The place looked abandoned, with rotted fence posts and a gate hanging off its hinges. Crows perched on the twisted limbs of a dead tree, cawing ominously as he approached. A chill pricked his skin. He left his bike propped against the fence, creeping forward on foot. The yard was overgrown with tall grass and weeds, the remnants of a garden run wild. The house itself was 2 stories, paint chipped and curling, windows broken or boarded. One window on the ground floor had an old piece of plywood with a chalky symbol scratched in the corner. Noah squinted. The symbol looked like it could be a triangle, maybe with something in the center, worn away by weather. His breath caught. Carefully he tested the front door. But he circled around the back, stepping over debris that might have been a fallen gutter or a broken porch step. The back door was slightly ajar, and his heart pounded as he pushed it open with the tip of his shoe. A musty smell engulfed him, like rot and mold. He stepped inside, blinking to let his eyes adjust to the gloom. He found himself in a kitchen that looked frozen in time. Cupboards half open, a table knocked over, chairs strewn about. Dust coated every surface, thick enough to track footprints. He forced himself to move quietly. "I shouldn't be here," he whispered, but the memory of the phone's warning and the note scrawled with the symbol propelled him forward. He passed into a narrow hallway with faded wallpaper. Pale light seeped through a grimy window at the end, illuminating motes of dust dancing in the air. His pulse hammered. At any moment he expected a rat or some vagrant to lunge at him. But the silence was thick, only broken by the hollow creaks of the floorboards under his sneakers. At the hallway's midpoint, he nearly tripped on something. Looking down, he realized it was a battered file folder, half stuck under a fallen picture frame. The folder read Carter in bold letters, with the word "missing" scrawled beneath it in red pen. Noah's heart leapt into his throat. Carefully he picked it up. Pages inside, water-damaged, hinted at official police documents. He could see the Hartley's Creek Police Department header. But they were incomplete. Torn corners, paragraphs blacked out. A sense of dread filled him. "This must be the missing file," he breathed. "They came here." Footsteps creaked on the floor above, freezing him in place. He yanked his hand away, eyes darting up the staircase that rose from the far end of the hall. Dust drifted from the ceiling with each soft thump. Someone was there. Noah panicked. He hugged the folder to his chest, scanning for an escape. The back door was behind him, but the hallway was narrow. If whoever was upstairs came down, they'd block his path. Without thinking, Noah ducked into a side room. It turned out to be the living room, equally decrepit, with a couch so molded it looked ready to collapse. He crouched behind it, breath ragged, trying to steady his trembling limbs. The footsteps reached the top of the stairs, paused. Then they began descending, each step slow and deliberate. A voice, low, male, carried faintly, "I know you're here." Noah's heart lurched. He peered from behind the couch, making out a figure through the gap in the door. A tall man wearing heavy boots moved carefully down the steps, scanning the hallway. His face was partially in shadow, but as he stepped into a beam of light, Noah's blood went cold. It was Sheriff Donahue. Sheriff Donahue wore the same uniform that used to reassure Noah as a little boy: brown shirt, gold star pinned to the chest, a broad belt with a holster. But his expression wasn't friendly or sympathetic. It was hard, predatory. "Boy," he called, "there's no point hiding. Let's talk." The tone was calm, too calm, which only terrified Noah more. Noah's breath shook. He's part of it, he realized, a wave of betrayal slamming into him. The man who told him for years, "We're doing our best to find your folks," was standing in an abandoned house, hunting him like a cornered animal. Noah gripped the file. He had to escape. The sheriff took slow steps down the hallway, peering into the kitchen, then glancing into the living room. Noah ducked low behind the couch. His heart hammered so loudly he was sure it would give him away. The man's boots scraped the floor near the threshold. Seconds ticked by like hours. Then, as though by grace, a sudden noise from outside, a crow cawing or maybe a branch snapping, drew Donahue's attention. He turned away. "We'll finish this conversation later," he muttered, and moved toward the back exit. Noah seized the moment. The second the sheriff's back vanished from view, he bolted. He sprinted through the living room, out the front door, no longer locked, apparently having been unlatched, and flung himself down the broken porch steps. Adrenaline blinded him to any pain from the uneven ground. He grabbed his bike and tore down the dirt lane, pedaling so hard his lungs burned. He didn't look back. If Donahue was pursuing him, he wanted as much distance as possible. By the time he reached the edge of the highway, his legs felt like jelly, and cold sweat drenched his shirt. He coasted behind an old billboard, gasping for air. He was there, he whispered to the file folder, as if the battered papers might answer him. The sheriff is in on this? It was too horrifying to fully register. The man who had offered him comforting words, who always asked how he was doing, was part of a ring that was abducting people, maybe even his parents? He forced himself to keep going, merging onto the sidewalk leading back into town. The midday sun baked the pavement, but he barely noticed, mind whirling with panic and anger. He considered going straight to the police station, but that was laughable now. The sheriff was the police. Who else could he trust? The phone message repeated in his head, "Don't trust anyone." Eventually, he made it home, dumping his bike on the lawn. He barged through the front door and locked it behind him, slumping against the wood, chest heaving. The house was quiet. Toby wouldn't be back for a couple more hours. Now was his chance to go through the file. Swallowing hard, he slid down onto the living room carpet, carefully opening the folder on the coffee table. Pages spilled out, some old photos of Mark and Lisa Carter, some typed reports referencing unauthorized inquiries and potential leads. Entire paragraphs were blacked out with thick marker, making them impossible to read. In the margins, someone had scribbled, "Cult-like group, infiltration, keep quiet." The triangular symbol, drawn in pen, adorned the corner of multiple pages. One line stood out. "If the Carters pursue further investigation, they'll be dealt with. Sheriff D. is on board." Noah's breath caught. Sheriff D. That had to be Donahue. The next page was torn. Maybe the missing chunk explained how they planned to deal with his parents. Another note read, "Hush money from undisclosed donors." The final page was half missing, but the bottom portion was left, referencing a phone number for the FBI, scribbled but not dialed. His parents must have planned to go to the feds. They never got the chance. For a long moment, Noah sat there, shaking with a combination of fear and righteous anger. This was bigger than he could handle alone. His parents must have known that, which is why they tried to contact the FBI. Now, 6 years too late, he held the same evidence in his hands. If the sheriff was part of it, who else? Did that mean Toby knew? Toby had never mentioned any of this. But Toby had always seemed uneasy when discussing the day his sister, Noah's mother, vanished. Could Toby have been threatened? Noah carefully hid the file with the phone and clippings in his backpack, which he tucked at the back of his closet again, under a pile of old sweatshirts. He paced the living room, fiddling with the hem of his t-shirt, trying to decide what to do. Part of him wanted to run away, part of him wanted to confront Toby immediately. But the memory of Donahue's cold expression made him realize this was life or death. His parents had paid the price for getting too close. Would Toby or Noah be the next to vanish? He practiced what he might say to Toby once he was sure it was safe. Hours later, the rumble of the old pickup truck signaled Toby's return. Noah's stomach twisted. Should he lie? He planned to come clean, but the phone's warning echoed once more, "Don't trust anyone." In the end, he told Toby only that he spent the afternoon reading and napping, feigning a headache. Toby didn't press too hard, but he gave Noah a curious glance, as though he suspected something more was at play. That night, Noah barely slept, haunted by nightmares of the sheriff's boots echoing in that empty house, of his parents locked away in a basement somewhere. By morning, the pressure had built too high in his chest. He couldn't keep Toby in the dark anymore. The man had sacrificed so much to take him in. He deserved the truth. After breakfast, burnt toast and scrambled eggs they ate in a tense silence. Noah stood in the doorway to Toby's small workshop. "Uncle Toby," he said, hands trembling behind his back. "I need to talk to you." His voice cracked. Toby switched off the belt sander, turning with a worried crease between his eyebrows. "What's going on, kiddo? You look like you haven't slept." "I found something in the attic," Noah managed. "I need you to see it." He forced himself not to interpret every flicker of emotion in Toby's eyes as guilt. They returned to the living room, and Noah ducked into his bedroom, emerging with the battered box, the phone, the clippings, and the half-ruined police file. Toby's expression went from mild puzzlement to pale shock in a matter of seconds. "Noah," he whispered, sinking onto the couch. "Where? How did you?" "I found it under a loose floorboard," Noah said, his voice unsteady. "It belonged to Mom and Dad, didn't it?" Toby let out a shaky breath, rubbing his temples. They told me they were onto something dangerous," he finally admitted, voice trembling with old pain. "I didn't know they hid stuff in the attic. I suspected, but I never went looking. I was too afraid." "Afraid of what?" Noah pressed. His eyes burned with tears he refused to let fall. "You knew they didn't just leave, didn't you?" Toby's gaze flicked up, wet with anguish. "I knew they were investigating disappearances. They'd discovered some pattern, something about a group with too much power in this town. They said it went high up, even into the police. They warned me that if they vanished, it meant they'd gotten too close." He swallowed hard. "They told me to protect you. You let me believe they might have abandoned me," Noah said, voice cracking with both betrayal and relief that Toby was opening up. Toby's own eyes brimmed with tears. "I didn't know how to tell you the truth. That they were taken. That they might never come back. I was scared those same people would come for you if they realized how much your parents had shared with me. So I never said anything, never dug further. I just kept my head down and raised you the best I could." Noah's chest felt tight. "Why didn't you call the FBI?" "Because I didn't have the proof," Toby said, gesturing to the scattered documents. "Everything I had was hearsay, your dad telling me about cultists or dirty cops. I was afraid if I went to the authorities, I'd be talking to the very people who took them. So I stayed quiet." "I'm so sorry." Noah nodded slowly, tears leaking down his face. He wiped them away. "I saw the sheriff," he confessed, voice shaking. "He was at that abandoned house on Maple Ridge, where the file was. I think he's part of it." Toby's eyes widened in horror. "Donahue? God, I didn't want to believe it, but your parents suspected him, too. He trailed off, burying his face in his hands. Silence stretched between them. Eventually, Toby lifted his head, jaw set. "We can't keep living in fear. If Donahue is still pulling the strings, who knows how many more people will vanish? We have to finish what your parents started." A flicker of determination sparked in Noah's chest. "Yeah, but we can't do it alone." Toby nodded, chewing his lip as he thought. Then he snapped his fingers, rummaging in a kitchen drawer for a business card. "There's an FBI agent named Sylvia Grant," he said. "She came through Hartley's Creek about a year ago, investigating a separate case. I've got her card somewhere." He pulled out a crumpled card with faint lettering. "If this number still works, we might get her attention." Noah felt a surge of hope and terror. "But if the sheriff intercepts the call?" "We'll be careful," Toby said. "We'll use a burner phone, or we'll call from a payphone in another town. Something to avoid suspicion." He glanced at the clock, then at Noah. "I have to head to work soon, but tonight, we plan our next move." Noah nodded, feeling both relieved and terrified. They had a plan, shaky though it was. Perhaps his parents weren't gone forever. Maybe, just maybe, they were still alive, hidden away. Even the thought was dizzying. That afternoon, Toby left for the hardware store, leaving Noah once again to his own racing thoughts. The hours dragged. He scrolled through the articles on his phone, cross-referencing the missing persons cases with what he'd found. So many families left in the dark. All the official statements came from the sheriff, promising thorough investigations that never led anywhere. Noah's anger built. He pictured Donahue's calm, menacing face in that house. The man who had looked him in the eye for years, feigning sympathy. By the time Toby returned, night had settled in, stars faint behind drifting clouds. They ate a quick dinner, neither tasting much of the spaghetti Toby prepared. Then, under the dim kitchen light, Toby spread out the evidence. He wrote bullet points on a notepad. Disappearances match the timeline of 6+ years. Triangular eye symbol is some sort of cult mark. Sheriff Donahue likely involved. Parents discovered hush money, corruption, society embedded in law enforcement. Must contact FBI discreetly. We need more than speculation, Toby said. We have the partial file, but it's incomplete. If we get Agent Grant to come, we can show her all this. But she'll probably need more. Something that ties Donahue directly to these crimes. Noah thought back to the phone's single photo. What if there's more at that house we haven't found? Or maybe somewhere else? Could the missing pages be hidden somewhere? Toby drummed his fingers on the table. That house is too risky now. Donahue might be watching it. We might need a different angle. He paused, then asked quietly, "Do you remember that day? The day your parents disappeared?" Noah's breath caught. Memory was slippery, he'd only been 6. But certain images remained, his dad pacing, phone pressed to his ear, voice sharp with urgency. His mom typing furiously on the computer, then slamming it shut when Toby walked in. Vague details, Noah murmured. They were upset in a hurry. Mom told me everything would be okay, but she was crying. Then they both left around dinner time. They said they were heading to meet someone who had evidence. Toby nodded grimly. I was out of town that night. When I got home the next morning, you were alone. They never came back. Silence lingered in the small kitchen, thick with unresolved grief. Then Toby shook himself. All right, let's do this. Tomorrow, I'm off work. We'll drive to the next county. There's a payphone outside an old diner where no one knows us. We'll call Agent Grant. Noah breathed a trembling sigh of relief. Yeah, let's do it. They didn't sleep much, anxiety twisting their stomachs. In the early morning, they packed the evidence into a padded envelope, along with a written summary of everything they knew. They left the house by 8, Toby driving his dusty pickup, Noah clutching the envelope on his lap. The roads were quiet, farmland stretching on either side. The sky threatened rain again, thick clouds drifting ominously. After nearly an hour, they turned off the main highway onto a potholed side road leading to a diner that looked like it hadn't changed since the 1950s. A single payphone stood near the parking lot, graffiti covering the side. Wait here, Toby said, handing Noah a crumpled $5 bill. Get us some coffee. I'll make the call. Be careful, Noah said, swallowing his fear. Inside the diner, the smell of bacon and old coffee hung in the air. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with a name tag that read Cindy, barely looked up as Noah approached the counter. He ordered 2 coffees, ignoring how his hands trembled. Out the window, he saw Toby step into the phone booth, fishing for coins. Toby dialed, pressed the phone to his ear, and his mouth moved in silent conversation. Noah watched him closely. Toby seemed tense but determined. After several minutes, Toby hung up, raking a hand through his hair before returning to the truck. Noah paid, grabbed the coffees, and hurried out. Well? He asked once they were both back in the cab, passing Toby a paper cup. The coffee's bitter scent swirled. I talked to her voicemail, Toby said, voice heavy with tension. Left a cryptic message, said we had vital info about corruption in Hartley's Creek. Told her to call this payphone tomorrow at noon, we'd be waiting. Noah's shoulders slumped. What if she never checks that voicemail? Or thinks it's a crank call? She'll check, Toby said. I remember her. She took every tip seriously. He exhaled. We'll drive back here tomorrow, same time. If she doesn't call, we'll figure out plan B. The drive home felt even longer. Noah stared at the passing fields, adrenaline draining to leave behind a hollow exhaustion. He tried to imagine what it would be like if the FBI got involved. Agents combing through the sheriff's records, searching abandoned properties, hopefully finding his parents. That hope sustained him, even though doubt gnawed at the edges. What if his parents were gone? This lead was 6 years old. Back in Hartley's Creek, Toby insisted they act normal. That meant going grocery shopping, washing laundry, keeping up appearances. Noah forced himself to watch TV in the evening, though every scene blurred. He jumped at small noises, half expecting the sheriff to break down their door. The phone never rang, but he wouldn't have answered it anyway. He was too rattled by how deeply the local police might be compromised. The next day, they repeated the drive, hearts pounding. As noon approached, Toby stood in the phone booth, Noah lurking near the truck, scanning the empty parking lot. At exactly 12:04, the phone jangled inside the booth. Toby snatched it up. Noah tried to read Toby's expressions through the smudged glass, but it was impossible. Toby spoke for several minutes, then hung up. He stepped out, eyes shining with a tense mixture of relief and fear. "She's willing to meet," Toby said. "Tonight, at 8, there's a rest stop off Route 29. She said to look for a silver sedan with tinted windows. She'll have ID and a special code word, Nightfall." Noah's heart soared. "She's actually coming?" "She said she's been looking into unexplained vanishings in our region for a while," Toby explained, glancing around to be sure no one was listening. "We're not alone." They left at dusk, heading for the designated rest stop an hour away. The sky glowed with a bruised purple hue, clouds drifting in the twilight. Noah felt every bump in the road, every shift of the truck's old engine. He clutched the envelope on his lap again, rechecking the police file fragments, the phone, the photos. Toby drove in tense silence, scanning the rearview mirror frequently. They arrived at a lonely strip of asphalt with a few parking spots, a couple of vending machines, and a flickering fluorescent light. A battered pickup truck and a sedan were parked near the vending machines, but neither appeared to be the silver car they expected. They waited, engine idling, eyes peeled. Shortly after 8, headlights appeared on the road. A silver sedan rolled in, tinted windows glinting. Toby sucked in a breath. "That's her." They turned off the truck, stepping out cautiously. The sedan parked a few spaces away. Out came a woman in her 40s, wearing a neat blazer and sensible shoes, dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. She moved with the controlled confidence of someone used to being in danger. Toby raised a hand in greeting. "Hi. We're—" She cut him off softly. "Nightfall?" Relief washed over Toby. "Nightfall," he echoed. "We're Toby Reed and Noah Carter." The woman flashed a slim wallet, revealing an FBI badge with the name Sylvia Grant. "I got your message," she said. "This place seems quiet enough. Let's talk in my car." Her voice was calm but urgent. They climbed into the sedan. The interior smelled faintly of coffee and the pine tree air freshener that dangled from the rearview. She turned on a small overhead light. "Let's see the evidence." Toby handed her the envelope. She scanned the articles, the phone logs, the partial police file, lips pursing tighter with each page. Occasionally she asked a clarifying question. "Where did you get this? When was this discovered? Who's your main suspect?" Toby and Noah answered as best they could, explaining the triangle eye symbol, Sheriff Donahue's suspicious behavior, the hush money references, the possibility that the Carters, Noah's parents, had discovered everything before they disappeared. "You realize this is serious," Agent Grant said at last, setting the file on the console. "The corruption could run deep. If the sheriff is involved, others in the department might be too. This is a big, dangerous operation, not just one crooked cop. We've had rumors of cult-like groups in remote areas, but nothing solid. This is a potential breakthrough." Noah felt both validation and dread. "Can you help us?" Grant nodded. "I'll have to loop in my superiors. We need more than these partial documents to launch a raid. But I can send some discreet inquiries, maybe gather testimonies from families of the missing. If we can get a federal judge on board, we'll mobilize a small task force. The key is secrecy. If the sheriff catches wind, they'll vanish like smoke." Toby exhaled, tension making him rub at the back of his neck. "What about my sister and brother-in-law? Do you think there's any chance they're alive?" Grant's face softened. "I can't promise anything. But if these cultists are systematically abducting people, they might keep them alive for a while. Maybe for labor or for some twisted reason. I've seen it happen before." She paused, noticing Noah's pained expression. "Don't give up hope," she added gently. "Your parents risked everything to expose this. They were brave, and so are you for coming forward now." Noah swallowed, trying not to cry in front of a federal agent. "What do we do?" Grant considered. "Stay quiet. Keep your daily routines normal. Don't show any sign of suspicion or panic. Let me do some digging on my end. I'll reach out to you in a couple of days. If something changes, if you feel like you're in danger, call me at this number." She handed over a slip of paper. "Memorize it, then destroy it. Don't store it in your phones." Toby nodded, slipping the number into his wallet. "We will." They parted ways with subdued relief and fear. On the drive home, Toby and Noah breathed easier, though the tension in the air was still thick. They had an ally now, someone outside the local sphere of corruption. But that also meant they were playing a high-stakes game. If any of the local conspirators suspected what they were doing, retaliation could be swift and brutal. The next few days crawled by. Toby went to the hardware store as usual. Noah attended school, though he found it impossible to concentrate. He half expected the sheriff to appear in the hallway, or to be snatched up by a black van on the walk home. At night, he combed through every memory he had of his parents, searching for clues. He also researched local legends about cults and symbols, though all he found were vague references to an eye of insight rumored in certain fringe groups. Finally, one evening, Toby's phone rang during dinner. He checked the caller ID, blocked. He gave Noah a nod, stepping onto the porch to answer. Noah listened through the screen door, tension flooding him. Toby murmured short replies, then fell silent to hear the other side. After a minute or two, he hung up and returned, face grave. "That was Grant," he said quietly, sitting back at the table. "She's found multiple families in surrounding counties who have stories similar to ours. Loved ones vanished, local cops turned them away, no leads. All the cases connect to that same symbol, plus rumor ties to some farmland outside of town. She thinks she's close to getting a judge to sign a warrant for a raid." Noah's pulse kicked. "A raid on who?" "The sheriff." "On a compound," Toby explained. "Grant said there's a remote property, supposedly private farmland, but no official record of crops or livestock. She suspects that's where the cult is operating. If the judge approves the warrant, she'll bring in a small team quietly. She wants me on standby to help identify local areas they might hide evidence. And she wants you safe, she doesn't want you anywhere near it." Noah swallowed. "If it means finding Mom and Dad, I'll do whatever it takes." Then another thought struck him. "Wait, if Donahue gets tipped off, he'll run, or he'll move everyone. We have to be sure it's a surprise." Toby nodded. "Grant knows. She said she's using a secure channel. The moment the warrant is signed, they'll move in fast." A flicker of hope took root in Noah's chest, though it was tinged with dread. If this went wrong, the cult might kill any captives. If it went right, they might save them. And if his parents were among them, Noah tried not to let the emotion overwhelm him. He didn't want to be crushed again. Days turned to a week. Noah oscillated between a desperate hope and suffocating anxiety. Whenever a cop car drove by, he stiffened. Whenever the phone rang, his heart jumped. Toby remained outwardly calm, but Noah noticed him double-checking the locks at night, peeking out windows. The tension reached a fever pitch when the phone finally rang again, blocked caller ID. Toby answered in the hallway, emerging with an ashen face. "They got the warrant," he said in a tight voice. "We have to meet them tonight. 10 p.m., at the old municipal lot near the railroad tracks. They'll brief us, then move on the compound. I told Grant I'd come alone, but I know you want to be there." Noah's heartbeat thundered. "I do. I have to. But I get it if you say no." Toby's gaze wavered. "Part of me wants you nowhere near this. But I also know you won't just sit here quietly. All right. You can come, but you stay in the truck unless Grant says otherwise." Noah nodded, relief and fear twining together. "I promise." They left the house at 9:30, Toby's truck rattling over the railroad crossing. The municipal lot was mostly deserted, just a few old buildings silhouetted against the cloudy night sky. A single black SUV waited under a flickering street lamp. As they pulled up, headlights from the SUV blinked once in greeting. Toby and Noah stepped out warily. Agent Grant emerged from the driver's seat, wearing dark tactical gear. Two other agents joined her, armed and tense. "Glad you made it," Grant said, ushering them to gather around the SUV's open trunk. Inside, A map was spread out. We're hitting this location, a remote compound about 15 miles south. We have a team of 8 agents total, split between 2 vehicles. We're going in quietly, cutting the fence if needed. According to intel, the sheriff and other members of this group might be there tonight. Noah's gaze locked on a circled patch of farmland on the map, marked with a pen. That's near the orchard, he said, remembering a place his parents once mentioned. Is that where they're keeping people? Grant nodded grimly. We think so. Our best guess is they use some of the old barn structures for whatever they're doing. Possibly holding captives. She turned to Toby. We might need your local knowledge if we have to chase them through back roads. You come in the second SUV. Noah, I'd prefer if you stay off-site, but I won't stop you from riding along if you need to see this through. Noah straightened. I'll come, but I'll stay out of the way. Grant gave him a nod of respect. All right, let's move. They caravanned in 2 vehicles, headlights off once they left the main road. The night pressed in around them, moonlight barely piercing the thick clouds. Noah's stomach twisted at every bump. Toby kept a grim silence beside him, eyes locked ahead. In the first SUV, Grant led the way, while the second contained Toby, Noah, and 2 more agents. After nearly 30 minutes of creeping along dirt tracks, they spotted a chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. Beyond it loomed several low buildings, a scattering of lights glowing in the distance. The SUVs parked in a grove of trees. Agents slipped out, snapping on night vision goggles, checking weapons. Toby and Noah hung back, hearts hammering. Grant signaled that the perimeter was quiet, no guards visible. Cut the fence, she whispered to one agent. Stay low. In a hushed scramble, they breached the fence. The group moved in 2 teams, flanking the main barn. Noah huddled behind Toby, every nerve on edge, half expecting alarm bells to shriek at any second. Instead, an eerie silence draped the farmland. Then, faintly, Noah heard voices, a muffled chant or humming from the barn. Flickers of light danced in the high windows, possibly from candles. Grant signaled the approach, and the teams fanned out. Noah watched from behind a stack of crates, forced to stand back with Toby and one agent who was covering the rear. Then, in a burst of motion, the lead team kicked open the barn doors, guns raised. Shouts echoed, FBI! Freeze! The chanting ceased abruptly, replaced by screams and frantic movement. Noah clenched his fists, peering around the crates. Shadows raced inside the barn, figures in hooded robes scattering. Gunfire crackled, mostly warning shots, it seemed. Then came a heavier volley from somewhere deeper in the property. Toby flinched, pulling Noah behind him. Stay down, Toby hissed. Grant's voice crackled over a radio, ordering her team to secure the barn. The second team moved toward a smaller shed near the back. Noah glimpsed people running, some in police uniforms. He thought he saw a flash of the sheriff's broad shoulders. A bullet tore through the night, ricocheting off metal. More shouting. The orchard beyond the barns rustled with the movement of panicked cult members trying to flee. Moments later, an agent waved Toby forward. We need you to identify something quick, the agent said. We found captives. Noah's heart leapt. Captives? Toby nodded at Noah, then followed the agent. They entered the barn cautiously. The scene was chaos, agents restraining robed individuals, others rummaging through crates, shining lights into dark corners. At the far end, behind a partition of wooden boards, Noah saw a row of small cells fashioned from metal bars, like dog kennels. Inside, cowering, were at least half a dozen disheveled people. Some looked malnourished, filthy, with haunted eyes. As Toby and Noah approached, an agent was cutting the padlock on one cell. A woman stumbled out, sobbing. There's more, she gasped. In the next building. The agent signaled for backup to investigate. Noah's pulse thundered. Could his parents be here? Then from the far right cell, a weak voice called, Help, please. Noah moved closer, shining a flashlight inside. His heart slammed to a stop. A man and a woman huddled on the floor, clothes torn, faces gaunt. Despite the grime and exhaustion, he recognized them, Mark and Lisa Carter, his parents. Mom. Dad. Noah cried, voice cracking with shock and joy. He lunged for the padlock, tears blurring his vision. "Help me open this," he shouted to no one in particular. Toby stood frozen for a beat, tears running down his face. Then he rushed to help an agent break the lock. The metal snapped. The door swung open. Noah dove into the cell, ignoring the stench, the cramped space. His mother stared at him, disbelief shaping her chapped lips. "Noah?" she croaked, tears flooding her eyes. "Noah, my baby." He wrapped his arms around her, voice breaking. "I found you." Mark, struggling to stand, embraced them both. How is this real?" His voice was ragged, eyes brimming with relief so intense it bordered on hysteria. "We brought the FBI," Noah managed. "You're safe now. We're going to get you out of here." Toby hovered, tears streaming down his face. "Lisa, Mark, I never stopped hoping. I tried everything." Lisa clung to him, sobbing, her frail body trembling. Mark gave Toby a look of profound gratitude and sorrow. "They had us locked in here for years," he whispered, voice tight with pain. "So many times we thought we'd never see you again." Agents bustled around them, radioing for medics, shouting about securing the perimeter. A wave of new gunfire erupted outside. Noah flinched, covering his mother protectively. The sheriff must still be resisting. Another volley of shots, then silence. Moments later, an agent came in, panting, "We got him. Sheriff Donahue's in custody." Relief crashed over Noah like a tidal wave. They had done it. The cult was being dismantled. His parents were alive, albeit weak and traumatized. Agents ushered the survivors outside, wrapping them in blankets. Medics checked vital signs, shining flashlights in their eyes, asking questions about injuries. Toby hovered protectively, never letting Lisa or Mark out of his sight. Grant approached, her hair damp with sweat, an adrenaline-charged look on her face. "We secured all suspects," she said, scanning the cluster of freed captives. "We found more people in a separate shed too. Looks like your parents weren't alone. I'm so sorry they had to endure this, but at least we got here in time." Noah wiped at his tears. "Thank you, Agent Grant," he said. "Thank you for believing us." She gave a small nod. "We'll need statements and medical exams, but let's get your parents to a hospital first. We'll handle the rest. You did good, kid." The hours that followed blurred into a tumult of sirens, flashing lights, and federal vehicles streaming onto the property. Ambulances arrived to treat the captives, many of whom were disoriented and malnourished. Mark had to be carried on a stretcher, his legs too weak to walk. Lisa hobbled beside him, refusing to let go of Noah's hand. Toby kept shaking his head in disbelief, tears shining. "I can't believe it," he repeated. "You're actually alive." Lisa managed a faint smile. "I told you we'd never leave him willingly," she said, her voice rasping. "We were so close to blowing the lid on them. That's when they took us." "Let's talk about it once you're stable," Toby insisted, voice thick with emotion. "We have all the time in the world now." They loaded Mark and Lisa into an ambulance. Toby climbed in beside them, while Noah stood back, heart pounding. An agent tapped his shoulder. "We have room for you in the next ambulance, or you can ride with me to the hospital. Up to you." Noah hesitated, then looked at his mother. She reached out a hand, beckoning him to join them. He climbed into the ambulance, settling on a bench seat. The doors slammed, and the vehicle pulled away, weaving down the dirt road toward a real chance at healing. In that moment, everything seemed surreal, a swirl of heartbreak, relief, exhaustion, and love. Noah looked at his parents, battered but alive, and felt tears scald his cheeks. They were half smiles, half sobs, an outpouring of years of pain released in an instant. Mark forced out shaky words. "We never stopped thinking about you, buddy." "We didn't know if Toby had told you." Noah squeezed his father's hand. "I found the box in the attic," he said. "And the phone with your text. I knew you didn't abandon me. I didn't know where you were." Lisa stroked Noah's hair, her weak arms trembling. "You did so good," she whispered. "Brought help." I can't believe you saved us. Her eyes shone with pride and heartbreak. Noah swallowed, pressing his face against her shoulder. I missed you, he mumbled, words muffled by the blanket. I was so scared you were. Not anymore, Lisa said, voice thick with tears. We're here, thanks to you. The hospital scenes were a whirl of doctors and nurses, bright lights, beeping monitors. Toby paced the waiting room while they ran tests on Lisa and Mark. Noah huddled in a chair, the realization only now hitting him that the sheriff and the cult had kept his parents alive for 6 whole years. He felt anger at their suffering, guilt for not finding them sooner, and a fierce gratitude for their survival. Toby occasionally rested a hand on Noah's shoulder, as if to ground him. At dawn, Agent Grant found them in the waiting area. She collapsed into a plastic chair, exhaustion etched into her posture. We have most of them in custody, she said, voice low. Sheriff Donahue, several deputies, plus civilians in the cult. The evidence we seized should put them away for a long time. The station's in an uproar. State police are stepping in to handle immediate law enforcement in Hartley's Creek until the dust settles. Noah nodded, throat tight. So, it's really over? As over as it can be tonight, Grant said, though there'll be investigations, trials, a lot of testimonies. The group has been operating for years. We suspect they threatened families, paid off officials, and used intimidation to keep everything hidden. Your parents, once they're healthy, can help testify. They might have crucial information. She paused, studying him. How are you holding up? Noah struggled to find words. Relieved mostly, he said at last. But also, it's a lot. Grant's expression softened. Take it one step at a time. You're a brave kid, Noah. Your parents are lucky to have you. Eventually, a weary doctor emerged, saying that Mark and Lisa were stable enough for short visits. Noah and Toby slipped into a small, sterile room. Lisa lay propped against pillows, and 4 in her arm, Mark asleep in a bed across from hers. She beckoned them closer, smiling weakly. You guys okay? Toby asked softly, tears edging his voice once more. Lisa nodded, tears filling her eyes. We'll get better. We need time. Noah gently took her hand, emotion choking him. We have all the time now, he said. They spent the next few hours in hushed conversation, careful not to wake Mark. Lisa shared some of what they'd endured, though she kept details vague to spare Noah. She admitted the cult used them as leverage and occasionally forced them to reveal what they knew about local people who might suspect foul play. They endured threats, intimidation, and isolation, but never lost hope that Toby or Noah would piece together the clues. The phone in the attic was a fallback plan they'd put in place if they were taken. They never expected it would be 6 years before someone found it. I just wish I'd looked for that loose floorboard sooner, Noah whispered, voice breaking. Lisa squeezed his hand. It's okay, she said gently. You were only 6. We're not blaming you for anything. The important thing is that you did find it. You saved us. He nodded, tears slipping down his cheeks. Toby reached over, resting a hand on Noah's shoulder, looking at Lisa with regret. I'm sorry, Toby said, voice trembling. I wish I'd done more. I was scared. Maybe if I'd. Lisa shook her head, lips trembling in a fragile smile. No blame. You took care of Noah. That means everything. We're together now. Her eyes filled again. We'll figure out the rest. Outside, the morning sun brightened the horizon. Nurse shift changes brought a flurry of activity to the halls, but for Noah, time had lost meaning. All that mattered was that his family, nearly destroyed by the twisted cult, was alive and on the path to recovery. Weeks passed in a blur of medical checkups, therapy sessions, and debriefings with the FBI. Mark's legs regained strength slowly under physical therapy, while Lisa's mental wounds required gentle counseling. They moved from the hospital to a rented apartment near Toby's place. Noah visited them every day after school, still half in awe that he could hug them whenever he wanted. Hartley's Creek reeled from the scandal. The local news plastered Sheriff Donahue's mugshot everywhere, detailing the arrests of multiple deputies and town officials complicit in the cult's activities. People gossiped in hushed voices on porches and in the diner, unable to believe the friendly sheriff had orchestrated so much evil. The triangle eye symbol became a subject of shocked whispers. Some cursed themselves for never noticing the pattern of disappearances. In the midst of the media frenzy, Toby sold his house, too many bad memories there, and found a new place near the city where Mark and Lisa could rebuild their lives quietly. Noah changed schools, initially anxious about leaving everything familiar behind. But he had to admit, after everything that happened, he was ready for a fresh start. He still carried nightmares of searching that abandoned house, of seeing the sheriff's silhouette on the stairs, but having his parents safe helped quell the darkest of those terrors. Agent Grant remained in contact, providing updates on the case. She explained that the cult's beliefs revolved around some twisted notion of purging outsiders who threatened their secret circle. They infiltrated law enforcement to stifle investigations, using hush money from wealthy backers who believed in the cult's manipulative creed. Over time, they'd grown brazen, snatching people who stumbled upon their doings. Noah learned that 1 or 2 ringleaders had evaded capture, but the FBI was on their trail. He found it frightening, but at least the operation was largely dismantled. Lisa and Mark cooperated fully with the feds, giving hours of depositions about their captivity. Though it was traumatic to relive, they believed it might save others. Noah sometimes overheard them talk about the humiliations they faced, and it broke his heart. Yet each day they grew a bit stronger, physically and emotionally. They took timid steps outside in the sunshine, marveling at the freedom they once took for granted. Toby found them a good therapist, and slowly, they emerged from the shadows. One afternoon, about a month after the rescue, Noah came home from school to find Mark, Lisa, and Toby in the living room, sifting through paperwork. They beckoned him over. "We're discussing what's next," Mark said, offering a smile. He looked healthier now. He'd gained some weight, and the color had returned to his cheeks. "We could move far away, try to forget this place, or we could stay nearby and testify against them in court." Noah perched on the edge of a worn armchair. "What do you want to do?" Lisa sighed, leaning against Mark. "Part of me wants to run, but I also feel like we owe it to the other families to see this through. We can help the prosecution lock these monsters away. The trial is set for a few months from now. If we vanish, the defense might argue we're unreliable." Toby pressed a hand to Lisa's shoulder. "I'll support you no matter what. But you don't have to do this alone. I can testify to some of it, especially the hush money threats." And Noah found that evidence. Noah's heart seized. "If you're testifying, doesn't that mean more danger?" Mark grimaced. "Potentially. But the FBI can offer some protection. And if we don't speak up, they might walk free." He exhaled. "I can't let that happen." Noah looked around at the faces of his family. He saw the determination. In the months leading up to the trial, the Carter family found themselves living in a modest rental house in a safer district, courtesy of the witness protection arrangement. They had limited contact with friends or the outside world, to reduce the risk of intimidation. Noah felt restless, but he understood. Each day, Mark grew stronger. He even accompanied Toby to a local park to practice walking longer distances. Lisa spent hours journaling her experiences, preparing for testimony. Noah studied in a new school district under an assumed name, trying to adapt. The nightmares didn't vanish, but holding his parents' hands during those nights reminded him he wasn't alone. Eventually, the trial began. The court was in a city an hour from Hartley's Creek, to avoid local bias. The indicted included Sheriff Donahue, several corrupt deputies, and some of the cult's identified leaders. The public was riveted by the revelations. Families of the missing packed the gallery, including a few who found closure learning what happened to their loved ones. Mark and Lisa took the stand with calm resolve, recounting how they uncovered the conspiracy, how they were abducted, locked away, and forced into compliance. Noah, though shielded from direct questioning in court, attended some of the sessions. He sat with Toby in the gallery, watching the legal proceedings. He caught glimpses of Donahue's stony face as accusations piled up against him. The man refused to meet Noah's gaze. Other defendants squirmed under cross-examination, their alibis unraveling. Agent Grant testified with all the evidence, including the partial police file and the testimonies from multiple rescued captives. On the final day, the jury deliberated for hours. Noah paced the courthouse hallway, tension gnawing his insides. Finally, the foreman read the verdict: guilty on multiple counts, kidnapping, conspiracy, accessory to murder in some cases. The cult leaders received maximum sentences, and Donahue was sentenced to a lifetime behind bars. A wave of applause and weeping rippled through the courtroom. Lisa grabbed Mark's hand, tears streaming. Toby let out a shaky breath, head bowed. Noah felt a swirl of relief and sorrow for all that had been lost. In the aftermath, life didn't magically revert to normal. Mark and Lisa carried trauma that would take years to heal. Noah grappled with anger and fear, occasionally lashing out or retreating into silence. Toby did his best to offer stability, working as a mechanic in the new town and making sure therapy appointments were never missed. Over time, though, the family found a rhythm. They celebrated small victories: Mark walking a mile without pain, Lisa feeling confident enough to volunteer at a local library, Noah making a new friend at school. Months passed. The media attention waned, replaced by new headlines. But for the Carters, every day was a reminder of their triumph over darkness. They moved into a modest home with a sunny backyard, planting a vegetable garden Lisa tended zealously. Sometimes, Toby would push Mark in a wheelchair out to the yard, and they'd watch Noah coax the dog they adopted, a mutt named Rusty, into chasing squirrels. One late afternoon, as the sun dipped low, they all gathered on the porch, sipping lemonade. The air was warm, cicadas buzzing. Noah's mother ran a hand through his hair, smiling. "Feels almost normal," she mused, eyes flicking to Mark. "Like we never left." Mark nodded, tapping his cane. "There's a lot we'll never forget, but I'm grateful for this peace." Toby settled on the porch steps, half listening, half watching the clouds. "We deserve it," he said quietly, a small grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. "We earned it." Noah glanced at them, tears unexpectedly gathering in his eyes. "I'm so glad we're together," he murmured. I can't believe it sometimes." Lisa leaned over, kissing his forehead. "Believe it," she whispered. "We owe it all to your courage. Finding that box. Never giving up." A swirl of love and pride warmed Noah from the inside. Sure, nightmares might still visit, and the scars of the ordeal were real, but the future felt hopeful. This was the 15% of the story they never thought they'd get: the resolution, the gentle epilogue of a family reunited, forging a new path. As evening painted the sky in hues of pink and gold, they gathered around the dinner table. Toasting with glasses of iced tea, Toby offered a quiet prayer of thanks. Mark proposed a short speech, voice trembling with emotion, to second chances, to never giving up. They clinked glasses, a soft chorus of watery smiles and heartfelt nods. Noah sat back, letting the warmth of the moment envelop him. His mind flickered over the terrible months leading up to this: the terror, the deception, the final raid under starless skies. It was all behind them now. He was a different person. Stronger, maybe older than his years. But he still had his family, still had Toby, and for that, he felt an abiding gratitude that words couldn't capture. After dinner, as they were cleaning up, Toby nudged Noah gently. "Want to say anything to our friends watching?" he teased, eyes crinkling with a grin. Noah smiled, remembering the old phrase they used to begin the story: "Yeah, sure." He cleared his throat, even though no audience was physically present. "If you believe the truth should always come to light, if you think it's worth fighting for, then like and subscribe for more," he said with a wink and a laugh. "Thanks for watching." They shared a smile. Outside, the last rays of daylight slipped below the horizon, leaving the Carter family safe in the gentle glow of a new beginning. Be sure to like and subscribe for more stories that shine a light into the shadows. Thanks for watching. I hope to see you again.